Hi guys, we're continuing on with chapter 16, more simple animals. This time we're going to talk about cnidarians. Cnidarians are in phylum Cnidaria, and that basically means that they all have the ability to sting. If you look at the pictures on this page, you'll notice there are jellyfish, there's a coral, the pink one over to the side, and then right in the middle is an anemone. They all come in different shapes than these. These are just examples that I want you to see. All of them, if you came in contact, would have the ability to sting you or any other animal that comes close enough. So moving on with the characteristics, notice the big yellow highlighted stuff. Again, this is why cnidarians are considered animals. It all goes back to the cells. They are multicellular. Their cells are eukaryotic, just like yours. They are heterotrophic. All of these have to eat other organisms in order to survive. Different from the sponges, their bodies are usually radially symmetrical, which basically means you can cut them like you could cut a pie along any angle, and you would still get two symmetrical halves. They're soft-bodied for the most part. We'll talk about an exception in just a minute with some of the coral. But here's another big difference from the sponges. They do actually have germ layers, which doesn't sound that exciting, I know, to us, but it is a clear indication that they are more advanced. The two germ layers that that cnidarians have are the epidermis, which is the outer layer, just like your epidermis is your skin. It's there to provide protection. Then they have the gastrodermis. This lines the gastrovascular cavity, which is basically just kind of the chamber in the middle of their bodies. This is where digestion happens. That gastro prefix is the indication that this has something to do with digestion. Now, in between these two layers is a substance called mesoglia, and it's a jelly-like layer or substance that just keeps these two cell layers separate. Different cells can move back and forth between the two germ layers. Food can move back and forth as they digest, and it just kind of helps the organism keep its shape. Now, as far as structures go, these guys do have a nervous system. They have a nervous system that has a net structure, which basically means that if you can picture a net, it's just a network of connected nerves. There is no true brain. They are not going to be, like rocket scientists or anything. The nerve net basically gives them the ability to sense touch, to possibly move away in some cases from danger. You've probably all seen the videos where the coral are all out and the anemones are all just kind of floating out in the water, but as soon as something dangerous comes by, they all pull back in. That's a nerve net response. As far as excretion, which means getting rid of waste, that happens at a cellular level, so it just is released into the water. Respiration is not like breathing, it's about cellular respiration, making energy, making ATP, just like your cells do. The cells are responsible for themselves. Now, as far as structure, most of them are supported by water. There's no true muscle. Sometimes they will be said to have a hydroskeleton because the water basically kind of internally helps them keep their shape. Some people say that's not how it should be described. The one exception to this support is coral. Coral secretes a substance, a chemical compound called calcium carbonate, similar in some ways to your bone structure, and that forms a protective exoskeleton. It is not necessarily considered part of their body. They tend to live kind of inside it, but they do secrete it, and it is protective. All right, now body forms. There are two forms. A cnidarian can either be a polyp, which if we looked at it, we would think of an anemone. That's the picture up on the top corner. And a polyp is kind of cup-shaped. It has a tube, and in the middle of that tube, facing upwards, is the mouth. And I have mouth in quotes because it's not like your mouth. There's no teeth or tongue. It's an opening that leads to the gastrovascular cavity. Tentacles surround it. Those tentacles can help the organism to bring food in, can help to filter things out of the water. That's where the stinging occurs, which we'll talk about in a minute. At the other end is what they call a basal disc, and that is how it attaches to a hard substance. Polyp forms do not move very often. If they do, they just will release and go to another area that maybe has more food, or environmentally is a little bit better for them. But for the most part, they pick a place and stay. Sea anemones are kind of the big example of polyps. A medusa, on the other hand, is that bottom corner picture. It is a jellyfish. They have a bell-shaped body for the most part that swims, and I have that in quotes because they do have the ability to contract the ring kind of around their body and move a little bit, but for the most part they just drift. And then notice the tentacles. The medusa has kind of free hanging tentacles that when they're touched can sting other organisms. These are sometimes called the oral arms because those surround the mouth. Now, with other features, the main one, of course, are the tentacles, and these tentacles are lined with cells called cnidocytes. And there's a picture up there in the corner. The yellow part on that picture is the cnidocyte itself. This kind of outlines it right here. They are the stinging cells, and they contain in the middle kind of a coiled spring-like tube that is attached to a barb. The barb itself differs from one type of jellyfish to another, but basically it's just a sharp little point. And when contact is made with the tentacles, that barb is released and shoots out, and it will inject a toxin into the prey. Down here, kind of in this main part on this one that has been released, that's usually where the toxin is. The toxin can paralyze an animal and just make it unable to get away. It can kill an animal in some cases, or depending on the size, it could just be really painful. Some jellyfish, the toxin is highly poisonous to people. Others, like I said, it's just uncomfortable. And they kind of range from anywhere in between. Once the prey has been stung, then as it is either paralyzed or already dead, the tentacles will draw the prey into the mouth, and it is digested. They don't chew anything. Like I said, they don't have teeth, but there are enzymes that chemically will break down whatever the prey is, and that happens in the gastrodermis. Again, gastro is, by cells called the gastrodermis. The gastrovascular cavity is where that happens, but the gastrodermis releases the enzymes. Anything that can't be digested is then ejected back out of the mouth. So, pleasant thought. Now, reproduction, this is going to be our last bit. Reproduction, you have asexual, which means they basically make clones of themselves. Some polyps have the ability to just divide in half if they get too big. They also form buds in polyps where you just have a new kind of a baby anemone grow on the side of a bigger anemone. Once they are big enough, they separate completely and just live on their own. Sexually, cnidarians, first of all, are not hermaphroditic. So you have male or female cnidarians, and they both release their gametes, either egg or sperm, into the water. There is no reason, there is no actual choosing of a mate or anything like that. They just release their egg or sperm into the water and hope for the best. If an egg meets a sperm, fertilization occurs. Then that fertilization results in a zygote, and the zygote forms a hollow blastula. This blastula is just a ball of cells, and that ball of cells goes on and continues to divide until it becomes a flagellated larva, so it has a tail, and then it swims away, and it will pick a spot, settle down, and develop into a polyp or a medusa. Some of these organisms will go through both life forms. They will early on be a polyp and then develop into a medusa. Some are one or the other all of the time. All right, now last little bit involves sponges again. So this is the in the environment stage, and they both play a big part as far as the food chain goes. When they are in their larval form, so when they are just newly formed, both of these organisms, sponges and cnidarians, are a big part of the bottom of the food pyramid. They are what everything else would eat because of their size. And there are lots of them, and so they're not going to become extinct. Nothing's going to happen like that. And so they are a good food source. Sponges in particular are also filter feeders, which means they clean out whatever is in the water. It's good for the water, helps it keep clean. They are used sometimes in aquariums for that reason, because they will filter out the waste of the other organisms in there. Some cnidarians filter feed also, but not to the extent that sponges do. They can both be parasites, and they don't necessarily drain or harm the host, but they definitely are kind of a hindrance. They can live on the back of shells of larger animals, crabs, or other crustaceans, which just is hard, but they are protected, and then they get the kind of added benefit of whatever that organism is eating they are in contact with. Some sponges also are symbiotic with algae. The algae provide food through photosynthesis. Remember, algae are plant-like, so they go the whole photosynthesis route, and that means that they will be producing different glucose molecules, different sugars that the sponge could eat, and the sponge provides shelter. Anemones can form symbiotic relationships with fish. You have all seen Nemo, I'm sure. And that Nemo was in a symbiotic relationship with the anemone that he lived in. The fish basically act as bait for other fish, and they get too close, and the anemone will sting them and then have a food source. The anemone provides shelter for that fish. Remember in Nemo when Marlin makes Nemo brush? Clownfish are known for basically stinging themselves and building up an immunity, and that way they can live in the anemone safely. And then last but not least, coral reefs are formed. They are safe living spaces for smaller fish, for algae, for sponges. At this point, coral reefs are probably endangered somewhat because of human interaction, pollution, all those kinds of things, and it is a big detriment to the marine life. All right, so that's one more simple animal. We will continue on next time.